time when he may invite questions from you. So you feel free to prepare a question if something is burning and you want to address it, and you will be welcome at some point in the debate to be part of it. Sweet. So, okay. So, okay, I should look at the camera, yeah? Not to the TV. Okay. All right. I think since I am away from everybody, let me just go. Okay, welcome everybody to this Nancy Campbell Academy Grade 10 Science Debate. We are discussing today exploring the different dimensions of global warming from the perspective of different stakeholders. These stakeholders we have invited to participate are everyday people, the federal government, environmental scientists, and mining companies. We want to hear their points of view and understand the emphasis they want to give to different issues to address the climate change problems we are facing today. And in order to do this, we have kindly invited and we have now present with us Dr. Lance Robinson, who is an expert on resilience. He has been working with communities in Asia, Africa, and the Americas, addressing issues of coping with the impacts of climate change, especially with nomadic communities and isolated desertic indigenous peoples. So he is going to be facilitating this whole process, and we welcome him very much to be here with us, for being here with us at Nancy Campbell, and I would love to have a clap if we can for him. In our federal government panel, we have Mr. Amin Rohani and Mr. Tori. Welcome. In our everyday people panel, we have Memory and Mr. Maxwell. Welcome. In our environmental scientists panel, we have Jason Wallace and Arman Ahavan. Welcome. And in our panel representing the mining companies, we have Orlando and Lauren. Lauren is absent temporarily, and Orlando is with us online. Welcome. So now I welcome you to start this process, Dr. Lance Robinson. Thank you.
Well, let me just take off my mask for a moment to show my face. Welcome. Thank you for the introduction, and then I'll come up again. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the audience who came. Let me say one thing immediately, so the groups are not surprised when the time comes, and then I'll say a few more remarks as you prepare yourselves. We picked a random number as to which groups are going to make their presentation first. Each group is going to make a 1-minute opening statement, and then the other 3 groups will react, rebut if there's something they disagree with, offer their reactions to the first group's statement. And then we'll go to the second group to make their 1-minute statement, and the other 3 groups will have a chance to react and offer comments. So we're going to start with the mining companies. That will be the first group. Secondly, the government. Thirdly, the everyday citizens. And then fourthly, the scientists. So that's what order we're going in. So you can just prepare your thoughts, as I'm sure you've been doing already. Maybe can you put up the slide here, the first one? No, that one probably we can't see, so it's probably too small. Let's go to this one. So I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember what slides I picked here. I need to come see. All right, for those of you who can't read the writing, the professor, the teacher is saying there's nothing more important than your education. You can save the planet later. So I don't know when there have been climate strikes and days of action and things, if Dr. Orozco has sent you out into the streets or let you go out into the streets. Today, I hope we're combining these. Having some education here in school, but also thinking about action. Now, the format, as I've already explained, is different than a conventional debate, where we have a statement or an idea, and then two sides on the debate are arguing for or against. We wanted to do something that I think offers a bit more chance for exchanging ideas and finding common ground, but that's not to say that you can't disagree, and if one of the other groups says something you find objectionable, feel free to say so. We're not trying to hide disagreement or conflict, but we're not trying to magnify it either. So that's why we have this format with 4 different groups, and each sharing their ideas and thoughts about the issue. We'll keep it relatively informal. We have the formal part with each group making their 1-minute presentation, and the other 3 groups will each have 3 minutes to react to the group that made their statement. But I may interrupt, I may ask questions myself, and at some point we may turn to the audience and others, and depending on how time goes, then maybe we'll have a bit more free-flowing exchange and discussion towards the end. So don't expect me necessarily to go step by step the whole way. I may interrupt from time to time. Especially if, I don't know if you were watching one of these big global climate change meetings, the COP, which is called the Community of Parties, which is held every year, where all the countries of the world come together to talk about what their climate change plans are going to be. This was held this year in Glasgow, Scotland, just a couple of weeks ago. Greta Thunberg was there, the famous youth activist, and she complained about blah, blah, blah from all the world leaders. If I hear too much blah, blah, blah from you, I may stop you to ask for some explanations and to clarify what you're saying. So, I guess without further ado, we can get started. And I will turn now to the mining companies. I believe Orlando is joining us virtually. And so Orlando, you have 1 minute to present your opening statement.
I have a question before this. Okay. Is this question 1 or question 3? Because I know our statement is for question 3, but I don't know if we're going in the order of the questions or not.
The statement, your statement.
Okay. As we all are aware, mining companies provide a large proportion of our nation's wealth and employment. It also produces much of the energy-powered comforts that we need to support our lifestyles. Do we expect the entire world to stop living their one life to the full and live like we're in the Stone Age again? For example, if we stop mining, we would lose high-rises, bridges, airplanes, trains, space exploration, some medicine, surgery, both gas and electric automobiles, due to the scarcity of resources that can only be found while mining. Thank you.
Thank you. Very succinct, well under the 1 minute. We'll go to the government to give us your reactions. You've got 3 minutes to react, offer comments, and your perspective on what Orlando has shared.
So, mining is, as you said, a massive part of Canada's economy. It contributes to over $110 billion of our annual GDP. And it's very important for us as a whole and for the hundreds of thousands of people who work in the economy, in the industry. But that does not discount the immense carbon emissions and environmental impact that the industry has, which is why the Canadian government and the Mining Association of Canada has been participating in Towards Sustainable Mining, which is a commitment made by the Mining Association of Canada to promote and educate responsible mining in the country. And anything to say? Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. It is important that mining be part of our economy, but we have to ensure that it is done sustainably and not foolishly in waste of the limited natural resources that we as a country have. Thank you.
Okay. You've got a bit more time. Anything else you wanted to comment on?
I have nothing. No. Do you have something?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. We'll go to the citizen group.
So the first point that we wanted to speak about was that by chasing a greener earth, we are not trying to go back to the Stone Ages, but we also can't live without money. So it's not that we don't care about the earth and we are in the mindset of, oh, if we eliminate coal, we're going back to the Stone Ages. But we're thinking more of from the perspective of course, we need alternatives that are better for the world, but that are also accessible. And we can't be like, oh, in 10 or 15 years, when we actually have the technology that is able to replace coal and how versatile coal is, then we'll jump to that, because that's not really reliable for many of the everyday citizens who directly depend on mining companies and who work at mining companies whose families depend on these things. So we're not trying to go back to the Stone Ages, and we're not trying to be like, oh, the environment isn't important, but as of now we need an alternative that can replace coal that we can live off of for tomorrow's food. Thank you.
Okay. And the environmental scientists, your reactions.
So, mining may be a very big industry and a big part of how we live. However, it's not the only available energy source. For example, coal is playing a very influential role in how it affects our climate negatively. Therefore, we need to invest in more renewable sources of energy such as solar, wind, or hydroelectricity power. Solar power may have its pros and cons, but a vital consideration could be how solar power is a long-term energy source that will last for millions of years. It is also more cost efficient, where fossil fuels may cost around 5 to 17 cents per kilowatt hour, while solar energy costs average between 3 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, we're not saying to just make an overnight change here, to just completely stop using fossil fuels and move to a renewable source. But we could make a slow transition, where as less and fewer fossil fuels are used, more green energy will be used to replace it. So we do not need to have a period where we are living like we're in the Stone Age.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Let's go straight into the next group's opening statement, and that will be from the federal government.
Oh, I have a quick question. Are we able to make remarks after points someone else makes?
I think, Dr. Orozco, you can confirm, but I think we'll leave that until after all the three groups have done their opening statements and your initial reactions to what other groups have said.
You can decide.
Okay, all right. So let's have each of your opening statements and a bit of reaction first, and then we'll. But yeah, you can keep your notes to rebut things that have been said earlier. Federal government, yes, you can give your opening.
So the carbon tax was put in place to counteract high levels of carbon emissions by large companies such as miners. The carbon tax was implemented several years ago, and it has been recommended by many economists around the world to build a low carbon economy. It involves taxing people based on their use of carbon, and not just people but companies as well. And it has proven very effective in many other countries that use it. So my question to you is there any way possible, do you think that it is really feasible for us to solve this problem in any other way? Is there a better solution to stop carbon emissions?
Thank you. Let's go to we'll start with the citizen group. If you have any reaction to what the federal government has suggested and asked.
All right. What we want is a better alternative to fossil fuels, something that is accessible to all of us, even in lower income areas. We want, we don't have the money as citizens to invest in other options, so we don't have the money to invest in alternatives, but we want the bank's government to help invest into better alternatives such as solar, windmills, hydroelectricity, all of that. Solar is cheap and easy, but to teach third world countries, even ourselves, we can use it very, very well. But yet, for some countries, there's not a lot of sunlight at certain times of the year. We just need better technology for the moment to be able to create more energy and a better alternative to coals or fossil fuels that create a lot of CO2.
Thank you. The environmental scientists.
We couldn't find much, we did some research and we couldn't find much other solutions that we could go into it. We have looked into finding more eco-friendly sources such as solar power, hydroelectricity, and wind power to make a greater change. But most of those don't work, as they would be more cheaper. No, they would be less expensive, and you would need to do more ground enforcements and much other place stuff. And we also did some more investigation of research of this subject specifically on carbon tax. Where on carbon tax, it doesn't seem to have much of an effect as the past few years, as people and companies still buy large amounts, and it doesn't really stop anyone. And a thing we were thinking of for a temporary solution would be still to raise the prices, but have like a benefit for the others. Like, for example, something we can do to combat climate change is by getting the government to enforce a law that limits the amount of fumes that factories can emit. And if the factories can go over, if the factory goes over the certain limit, for example, like 30%, then they can threaten to shut down the factories and etc.
Thank you. And to the mining companies.
Yes, if there could be a better option, if the government could create a better, more efficient way to generate energy, solar, thermal, water, while at the same time not dooming everyone that works in the mining industries, the 42,000 people that either directly or indirectly are employed by it. If we could make an option where they could be employed to do something with this new better way of generating energy. And also, as the way it stands, there isn't much instruction on what to do with the carbon tax. Basically what happens is they say, okay, for every cubic ton of carbon, you're going to charge you $25, and they're going to keep increasing the price to eventually weed out mining companies and people that have the large CO2 emission. But that doesn't exactly give a lot of instruction on how to basically shrink your CO2 emission. It just kind of is trying to add a deterrent so that you don't emit as much carbon, which isn't always an option. All
right, thank you very much. Maybe before we go to the the everyday citizens to make their statement. We'll have another little cartoon interlude. So if you can pop up my next one. Can the guys online see this as well?
Not yet.
Not yet.
They can see it now.
Okay, but now we can't see it.
Yeah, that happened.
There's an idea that responding to climate change is going to cost us all a lot of money, and some people think it's going to cost too much. And this cartoon shows someone at a big international meeting making a presentation, talking about all the benefits from trying to adjust climate change. Energy independence, because we're not importing oil from other places anymore. Preserving rainforests, sustainability, developing new green jobs, livable cities, renewables, clean water, healthy children, etc., etc. And someone in the audience is complaining, what if it's all just a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? So I think the idea of this one is, and maybe we'll get into this issue as we talk, we often present this as a debate with people arguing against each other, and it's either we save jobs or we solve climate change. Either we make the world a better place by solving climate change, or we make the world a better place by letting people keep their jobs and save the economy. Maybe it's not a trade-off. Maybe we can do both. But let's come to that as we move forward. We'll see how realistic that actually is. Let's turn to the citizens, and we'll have your opening statement, please.
Okay, so we already have our question in front of us, but our kind of point on the question was, in this kind of example of an average citizen, this person is a father, a husband, and provider, and his family completely relies on him and him working in the mining industry. As well as that, we need to think about, what if mining stops? Let's say that we magically found an alternative, but it wasn't as versatile as coal or as efficient as coal, and mining stops, and this man can get a job alongside thousands of other people who work in the mining industry, which Max will speak about later on. And what if mining stops? How could this affect his family, his kids, his wife, the kids' education, and he would be left unemployed. So when we think about this, we need to think about this not as like a far off, like, oh, someday in the future we'll have an alternative to coal. We need to think about this like, if we stop coal as we want to do as citizens, because we want a better world for people, we need to think about what are we going to do after that. So I'll pass it on to my next.
One thing is, do we even have the technology right now to be able to make an alternative to coal if it stopped? If not, what can we even do to make a better world other than invest into other energies that are not developed yet? And even, can the government even compensate if the mines close, the 42,000 people that are left unemployed from coal mines closing? And can the government teach all those people of a new job or how to do it well? Unemployment is already a problem. We can't just really add 42,000 people to it. It's going to make the problem even worse than it already is. It's not really realistic since unemployment, like I said, is already a problem. One proposal I have is that we should give jobs to the people left unemployed if that does happen, or train them how to make other energies such as solar. It's not too hard to create. A lot of other countries, such as third world countries, have been able to do solar panels and other alternative energies to make it themselves. Or give free education on how to make them and training while making them.
All right, thank you. We'll turn to the environmental scientists for their reaction.
Sorry, did you call on me?
Which of the two of you are going to a reaction?
I'm going to, for question one, I'm going to be reacting. So, from our research, it appears that the clean industry is growing, and jobs such as wind turbine technicians and solar panel installers are two of the fastest growing jobs, and they're expected to grow in the coming years. As renewable energy jobs are growing, employment in the fossil fuel industry seems to be decreasing. Moreover, as coal miners and oil workers have a technical background and have experience working with complex machinery and equipment, this could be a great transition for them, and many are being recruited by renewable energy companies. And other advantage transitions to renewable energy jobs include job stability, higher wages, greater employee benefits, and improved working conditions while not requiring advanced degrees. As we transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources, we need to make sure that former fossil fuel workers are assisted in this new industry and are treated justly and not left without a job.
Thank you. The mining companies, your reaction to the citizens' presentation. Orlando, is that you giving the reaction to the citizens' opening statement?
Okay, well, I thought Lauren was, but I can. In reality, there isn't much hope for people that are employed if the government keeps on track with this, because the chances of them being unemployed within a couple of years with the carbon tax issue is pretty much 100%. Because we don't cut back on fossil fuels, then only people who gather these fuels and would be out of the job because the demand would just slowly decrease and decrease and decrease until just we don't need miners anymore. Even if the government donates money to you every month, like they did at the start of the pandemic, when a bunch of people lost their jobs and they'd give you like these like government wages basically, it wouldn't be enough to support a family. And secondly, and then also, even the government, the solution to this is the government needs to train people who are working in the mine. If they want to convert to a cleaner source of energy, they first need to make an opportunity to, allow these people to be employed, and then they need to train these people so that they can get a job somewhere else that isn't at the mine. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And now the federal government, your reaction.
So the Canadian government has been creating many jobs. They've implemented a plan to create over 1 million jobs for unemployed people coming from industries like the mining industry or the oil industry. And they've created a form of compensation for people who have lost their jobs at no fault of their own. So in the instance of a mine shutting down, former employees of that mine would be receiving 20%, up to 20% of their insured pay the first year, and up to 10% the second year after. And they would also be given assistance in finding a job and being trained in all the necessary skills required to excel at that job. And they also have employment insurance over that time where they are learning new skills. And the Canadian government is providing resources with where Canadians can quickly and easily find jobs that they are qualified for or can easily be trained for. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So now we'll go to the last group is going to make its opening presentation, and that is the scientists.
So there is so much evidence out there warning us about our emission of the greenhouse gases. To what extent are we willing to chase economic development at the expense of the planet we live on? And economic growth is generally determined by the gross domestic product, GDP. of a country, which is the total non-monetary value of the goods and services produced in a period of time. We have a great impact on this environment through increased consumption of non-renewable resources and a higher level of pollution, which leads to global warming. However, not all forms of economic growth is necessarily lead to damage of the environment. For example, as income rise in certain areas, people will have the option to use products that may be a bit more expensive but not as harmful to the environment. However, as newer technologies develop and we produce more environmentally friendly energy sources, it will allow production ways that are less polluting will result in countries continue to grow economically while not hurting the environment.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the mining companies now for their reaction to the environmental scientist group.
So in reality, there isn't much hope for them all because the chances of them being unemployed are pretty much 100%. Because if we begin to cut back on fossil fuels, then all the people who work together to gather these fuels would be out of job as demand for them decreases. Even if the government donates money to them every month until they find another job, first of all, it probably wouldn't happen, and secondly, the money wouldn't be enough to support even the families because there would be hundreds if not thousands of people in the same scenario as you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The federal government, your reaction.
The Canadian government has chosen to protect the environment first and the economy's development second in the developing the economies and protecting the earth. The Canadian government is very strict about environmental protection. Economic development, housing constructions, and all others work must complete with the environmental protection plan. Environmental assessments and countermeasures analysis such as pollution identification, pollution-based analysis, toxicity assessment, impact zone assessment, hazard qualitative analysis, and occurrence probability estimations, decisions analysis, etc. must be carried out before all the construction projects and study. The project constructions can only be carried out after the detailed data are obtained.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, we'll go to the citizen group.
So a lot of this would just be repeating what we said before. Of course, we want a green earth. Like, for example, in our opening statement, it was about a father who was worried about losing his job if the mines closed. And when we think about this from that person's perspective, just as an example of an everyday citizen, we need to think about it as like, of course, we want the children of this country to be able to live, and the children of the world to be able to live on a planet that is not constantly having disaster after disaster because of global warming and because of our input to destroying the environment. But we also don't want children who can't eat or children who have parents who can't afford to feed them because they don't have jobs. And like with what they were saying about, oh, we have alternatives. Solar, of course, it works in some countries, but it is not a reasonable alternative for most of the year in Canada, given that there is daylight savings time and many hours of the day in winter we don't have sunlight. So that is not a good replacement for coal when it comes to like versatility and for it to work as well as coal or to be as reliable as coal. But outside of that, we want a future for our children, but we need to think about right now and what's going on and what we will lose if we lose mining. So if we're given an alternative that we can use, we're completely on board with having a green earth. But as of now, we can't afford to lose our jobs and risk not being able to adjust well into new ones. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So we're all quite efficient with time, which is good, and that means we'll have a bit more time for a bit more interaction and informal exchange of ideas and some of the rebuttals that maybe some of you want to make to things the other groups have said. And for the people sitting in the audience, you also can start thinking if you have any questions or comments you want to make. Maybe you can throw up my next slide. So, can everyone see that? Right, and the guys online too?
Yeah, sure.
Very good. Good. So we want to save our jobs, but if we look back to like big cities in North America, say 120 years ago, the cities were growing, people were moving around by horse cart. And as cities like Toronto and New York got bigger and bigger, there were more and more horses. There started to be tens of thousands of horses in the city. Horses poop on the street. If you're in a little town of 5,000 people and everyone has a horse-drawn carriage, it's not a problem. But if you're a city that's up to 100,000 people, 200,000 people, these big cities were growing. I mean, now they're up to millions. If a city like Toronto or New York today had everyone riding horses instead of driving cars that use fossil fuels, we'd have a different environmental disaster than the one we've got. But we've solved that. We invented motor cars. 120 years later, those fossil fuel motor cars have caused a new problem. Is mining coal and drilling for petroleum, is it the next thing that needs to fade away, just like having a city of 1 million people riding horses needed to fade away? Is the petroleum and the coal mining, is that the dinosaur who doesn't want to switch to something new? I open this to any one of the groups who want to react. Is coal, oil and gas, all of those fossil fuels, are they from the past? Are they dinosaurs that we need to just set aside and put away? Any of you? Some of you have something to say on this, surely. Or is the question, am I missing something with this question? Okay, the citizen group? Yeah.
So I wanted to just say, like, as our part as citizens, we don't have very much say. Of course, every citizen can try their best to live greener or to be more environmentally friendly, but in reality, not many people have the funds to be able to do that. Because fast food is cheap, and for people who don't have a lot of money, they can't really afford an electric car or to go completely vegan or to do all of these things. They just really have to focus on feeding their families. So when we look at this, we're kind of in the middle, and we don't have very much power as citizens unless we all work together. And we're not trying to like overthrow the government and stop all mining and all of that. So we don't have that much power when it comes to this. We just need an alternative that we can use today. So electric cars are really expensive. So every single person can't buy an electric car. But we need something that everybody will be able to use, and we're kind of at the mercy of the government and the environmentalists because we don't have very much say in what happens because we don't have all of the money. And money is power in all honesty. So for us, we will be the ones who suffer if this goes wrong. And we will be the ones who will be living in polluted cities, breathing bad air, having our kids get sick. But we will also be the people who won't have jobs and be suffering from many of the similar problems just because we don't have the money to take care of our families or ourselves. So, thank you.
Well, in that case, let me turn to the federal government group and ask you, you talked a bit about retraining people. helping people to get new jobs and support, well, those who are in industries that are phasing out, like coal mining, look for new jobs. But how realistic is it that a 55-year-old man who's been working in mining his whole life is going to retrain and become, what, a computer programmer or something like that? Is your, and I offer this to the environmental scientists as well, we often hear about the problem and what needs to happen, and we don't often hear a whole lot about helping those people adjust who need to make the adjustments. Tell me how your plan to retrain those people who will be expected to lose their jobs, tell me how that plan can be realistic.
Well, it cannot be implemented immediately. It'll have to be phased in just like everything else. It will take time. And part of it being realistic still will involve mining, just not for fossil fuels like coal, because many of the components needed to make things like computers or electric cars or solar panels or wind turbines are still found in mines underground. So the mining industry will still be a very important part of a green future. What we have to focus on, sorry, I'm collecting my thoughts, would be ensuring that people like who are maybe not young and able to relearn skills or learn new skills like, for example, computer programming, we have to ensure that they still have a part in our future. And we, as I said, we will still need mining. It does not seem unrealistic to me to have them continue to mine just for something slightly more carbon friendly, environmentally friendly.
Okay, thank you. Our audience members, any of you have any questions or want to make a comment?
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, you have heard each other's points of view, and I just wonder, as a citizen, you that represent such important groups, like such important areas in the economy, like mining, like regulating all the things that we need to do to protect the environment, like living every day and keeping cities moving because you are working hard and making things happen, and also by contributing with science to inform decisions. How are you? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts about what kind of greater effort you can make to work together to address the current crisis? Like, what are you ready right now to sacrifice to make the issue of climate change to come to the forefront of your agendas, your development, your business, your creating regulations, all kinds of agendas in which you are involved? What is it that you are going to sacrifice, that you feel you can sacrifice to actually address the climate crisis you all agree we are facing?
Which group would like to try to address that question first? Can you make a sacrifice? Is there something you can do to make your contribution from your stakeholder group? None. Well, let's think about that. I may try and push at least one of you to answer that question in a minute. Let me ask a question. Maybe it's primarily directed, my next question, to the environmental scientists. But I leave it to any of the groups to comment on this. It's unfortunate one of our environmental scientists had to step out. But anyway, as I said, this question, it can be for any of you. But I wonder if part of the problem is that the news, the education about climate change is so frightening, and it's often presented in such an apocalyptic way. Polar bears drowning because they have no ice to swim on, sea levels rising, and stories about cities like Miami and Vancouver are going to be underwater. Is part of the problem the way environmental scientists present this is so frightening that people just shut down, and other stakeholder groups become opponents instead of looking at the problem? Is part of this doom and gloom way of speaking about things, is it part of the problem? Yes.
I think as everyday people, we believe that, like, of course it can be scary, but I believe that we have to be blunt. In this debate, we're looking at this issue from a point of the majority of Canada, or the majority of people living here, and about 70% of people believe that climate change exists. So we're looking at it from that point of view of this exists, this is a problem we have to deal with, and this isn't something that we can run away from or hide our heads under the sand and like pray that it will go away, because it won't. But what we're saying is that we're kind of just being thrown in the mix. And we are the ones who are going to suffer, as I said before, if this goes wrong. And we are also the ones who have to kind of make the change, but we don't have the money or power to do so as of now. So we're completely dependent on both the government and the environmentalists to find a better alternative for us, because as of now, we cannot do that as average citizens.
So, then one of the other groups want to respond? Well, all right, let me pop up one more cartoon. Maybe go, is there one more? Yeah, there's one more. Go to the next one. Maybe this one makes the same point that that you were just making. We've got the weather forecast on the 6 o'clock news, and the weather forecast is about storms, hurricanes, desertification, droughts, extinction, coastal flooding, refugees, all leading to economic collapse. So maybe the problem of whether or not it rains tomorrow or snows, or whether the temperature is 20 degrees or 22 degrees is a minor issue. These are big problems we're facing. And are we being too timid about responding? Are we being too worried about moving slowly? Are we going to sacrifice responding to climate change to keep the coal mining and petroleum going a little bit longer? So I'll turn to any one of you to answer that, or let me open the floor if any of you want to ask questions of one of the other groups, or respond to something one of the other groups has said. But my question is, for any of you, are we being too timid and we're being too shy to face the difficult choices that maybe it's just going to be realistic that we rapidly need to shift from coal mining and drilling for oil? Yes, okay, the citizen group?
Said that we can bring up a question
Yes,
from the
go ahead.
past.
Yeah.
All right, so the government, you in your point, your opening, had said that you're looking for opening 1 million jobs for those left unemployed, right? How are we, as the average citizens who've been working in mining in this case for a while, supposed to know that we're going to be paid the same or around the same amount when we already got low amounts of funds? And also, we've already specialized in coal this whole time. Like, how are we supposed to change, like, from it into another field? How much training are we even going to get?
About your last point, I said earlier that coal mining, or sorry, not coal mining, other kinds of mining will still need to be open for a green future simply because we can't make wind turbines or solar panels out of nothing. We can't just snap our fingers and they appear. We have to still have these materials in order to make these products. And you have to have people obviously working in those mines. And so a big part of shifting away from coal mining will be putting a bigger emphasis on sustainable mining of other minerals that will prove necessary. And it will not be certain that you will get paid an equal amount as you currently are, simply because mining has on average some of the highest wages out of any industry in Canada, simply because of the danger the job poses to the employees. The average wage for a person in the mining industry is $123,000 a year. So it cannot be guaranteed that moving to another field will get you a salary that high, simply because no other field is as dangerous as mining is. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to respond?
Maybe respond?
Yep.
I also wanted to ask on the matter of that, like time and time again, we as citizens have a difficult time in trusting the government many of the time. Because like even one of the arguments for climate change not existing, which is not what we're doing here, but one of the arguments is that people don't trust the government or don't want the government to speak for them or control them. And one of the struggles that comes with trusting the government or trusting that these policies will truly be implemented and be implemented well is that time and time again we've seen, oh, we'll do this, oh, we'll do that, especially with COVID-19, and then it not ending up working out. Like we are still dealing with COVID over a year later, and many governments around the world, including Canada, have been like, oh, we're going to eliminate this disease, and then it ends up not happening. Or with many other issues, it's very easy. What I'm trying to say is that it's very easy to be like, to make plans, make promises, and say, oh, we'll do this, or even think of ideas of how to fix these issues, but I think the struggle is implementing it and implementing it well. And as citizens, we struggle to believe that because time and time again, we've seen that not work out and we've seen that not happen. So my question is basically, how are we reassured that the federal government will stay true to its word?
Government, you got something to say?
Just thinking about that a little bit. You brought up the example of COVID-19. COVID-19 is somewhat of a freak incident. It's not something that happens all the time, and as such, the Canadian government was unprepared for it. It came out of nowhere, and we've had to adjust our goals for a greener future to accommodate having another major issue that needs to be solved immediately. So we cannot focus all our energy into working on a greener future or protecting the environment when we have a disease that is out there killing people. So that has been the main focus of our attention, which is why a lot of these plans that we have promised have not been able to come to fruition, because we have spent 2 years nearly dealing with a pandemic of vast proportions. Thank you.
Let me ask, oh,
It seems on this side, they don't hear you, they didn't hear your question, the one before
Okay.
they started the conversation.
okay. So, well, and so let me repeat it or rephrase it, particularly for Orlando and Lauren.
Sorry, he just has one more point to make
Oh.
about the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, all right, let's have the federal government finish up their point, and then I'll turn to the mining company.
Go ahead.
So in the COVID-19, the Kennedy government does not want you to say there's no plan. You should understand that there's at least 18% of the people in the Canada who think
Vaccinated.
vaccinated. I don't think this can be done by the government without a plan.
Okay. So they're questioning a little whether they're as unprepared as they were as unprepared as you suggested they were. 80% vaccination is not too bad compared to some countries. My question now for the mining companies is, do we just have to face reality? I mean, you're here representing the mining interests and your industry, and that's fine, but you're also citizens of this country. You also have children who are going to be living here, and eventually grandchildren. I don't think anyone is suggesting we're going to stop all mining, because as has been pointed out, we still need materials for batteries and solar panels and all kinds of different things that come from mining. My question is, are we being a bit too shy to face what is really a big problem, that we need to move faster, actually, and it's going to be difficult and it will be painful, but in fact perhaps we need to move faster in phasing out oil and gas and coal? So that's my question to you. So Lauren or Orlando, please share your thoughts on that.
Okay, no, Lauren, you go. Sorry, my bad.
I'll go and then you go. I don't believe that we're being too shy. I think we just know that with doing these things, it can affect people, and especially people's everyday lives, if we do this. So I think it's not that we're being too shy, it's just that we're taking everything in and trying to figure out the best way to go about everything. So yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any of you want to respond to that? Or Orlando? Orlando, go ahead.
Okay, well, other than what Lauren said, the government is also the reason that this situation kind of exists, because they've created the environment in which we've been able to make mining companies and have, a decent portion of it be, coal and other materials. And so basically we're going to need not guidance per se, but we're going to need kind of a set goal or objective from the government for us to reach, that we can do it more effectively and easier and just overall better, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the response from the government.
There already is a set goal for mining companies to reach. Part of Canada's goal to reach a net zero emission, carbon emission compared to 2005 levels by 2050 is having the mining companies also reduce their emissions to net zero by 2050 and reduce emissions by 50% by 2030. So it's not that there isn't any set goal for the mining companies, it's that they haven't taken action.
Do you want to respond to that? Lauren or Orlando? action that you've taken?
Okay, well, maybe it was just the way I phrased it, but what I kind of meant was the mining companies, because the government has created situations in which we've been able to like thrive and stuff. So basically, if you want us to, slow down and stop producing as much CO2, what I meant by my statement was we have a goal, but we don't have much guidance to get there. Like you have the carbon tax, but that's more of a deterrent than like a step-by-step instruction booklet. So basically, what I would ask for is for just general instruction, basically, on just how to shrink our carbon emissions while at the same time not unemploying most of our people, still, producing valid or valuable materials and keeping cost effective.
Well, so for one of our environmental scientists is online, right? So for our environmental scientists, this makes me want to ask a question of you. A lot of effort has gone into the climate science, the meteorology, the atmosphere, and so on. Has as much effort gone into the solutions and the transition? Has as much effort gone into how can we make our economy transition? Do we understand how to make the shift as well as we understand the problem? Do we need more emphasis from the scientific community on how do we transition to a new kind of economy and new kinds of jobs?
Can you repeat that?
The scientific community has had a lot of emphasis on the climate science, the hard physical sciences of how climate change is happening, how many degrees are we warming up, how quickly, how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. I'm wondering if the scientific community generally has let us down, has failed us a little in providing some guidance and solutions as to how do we make the change. Yes, you've told us we need to stop putting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, but we haven't heard as much from the scientific community about how do we change our economies to let people keep having jobs.
Well, I mean, from what we mentioned before of saying how we can make the transition from fossil fuels to green energy, it would be in the sense of like, not only are we going to have to, us as the scientists, help change, but also the people to help change by using greener ways of transportation. We're saying instead of using gas cars, it could be electric cars or switching to solar panels. In those senses, it has to be like everybody contributing, but also we need to find other ways, and even with like factories on how they're using a lot of fossil fuels to power those factories. So we can even use those to like say switch to solar power, and even like the government can help with all that carbon tax that they have, because they probably have a lot of it. They could give some incentive to the factories as a way to like help them transition from fossil fuels to greener sources of energy to maybe help with that.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we're going to start wrapping up now, and maybe what we'll do, I think this wasn't planned, so we haven't warned you, but I'll tell you now that we'll give each of you about 1 minute to just make a closing statement. Any last comments you want to make? And we'll go group by group to give each one of you an opportunity to speak. So I think we started last time with where did we start? We started with the mining companies. So let's start this time with the everyday citizens. Please give us just your last comments, anything you want to re-emphasize, or any last statements you want to make to all of us or to the other groups.
Alright, so kind of like our final statement would be that we don't like that we're very dependent on everybody, but we are, and that's the situation we're in right now. And as I stated before, it's kind of difficult to trust the government's plan, especially because the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, has constantly been criticized for having very big plans or making very big promises and not fulfilling them in a sense. And even in the debate that happened a bit ago, I think that was a while ago, but the electoral debate that we had, we saw almost every single party kind of criticize him for being like, oh, you're not living up to your promises or you're not living up to your standard, and kind of calling them out on it consistently. And that's one of the struggles with us believing that this will actually work, because yes, we believe that they're coming from a good place and we believe that they have good motives, and we even believe that their plan is realistic, but time and time again, if it's not fulfilling it, it's the execution in which they do that is usually the problem for us and that we suffer for. So we're not just going to blindly believe or just be like, okay, this will definitely work out and kind of throw our faith into people, but we need to be our trust needs to be won, and we need both the environmentalists and the government to be able to give us alternatives, and we just need it now rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the environmental scientists for their closing remarks. So that's, who's the one on the line? Arman, that's you.
For my closing statement?
Yes.
Okay. I guess for my closing statement, I can say that this whole thing with climate change and the greenhouse gases, it's all a very difficult thing to try to change because of how far we've come already, that it's becoming very difficult to make that transition back to making a greener environment. But I guess I would say it's all up to everybody to make, it's like everybody has to put in the work to make the change, make the sacrifice. I guess I would say that's my closing statement.
Thank you very much. Orlando and Lauren, your closing statement.
It's on you, Orlando.
Orlando, Lauren,
Okay. So, like Armand said, this really is a team effort, and we need everyone to work together in order to get over the problem that climate change poses on our country. So, yeah, we just all need to really work together and think about different perspectives with all the moving parts in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll turn to the federal government for your closing statement.
I think we'd like to make it clear how hard we've been working to create plans and find more information and implement said plans about climate change and protecting the environment. And we want to, as Orlando said and as Armand said, make it aware to everyone that it's a team effort. All of us are working together to make sure that the planet, the country, the future that we have is the best it can possibly be. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we will call our debate to a close, and let's give ourselves a hand.
To finalize this process, we will now, all of us will clap we clap, and the loudest clap will go to the panel we believe has performed the best for this debate. So that is just as a guidance for the rest of us to see how we feel about the performance of each one of the panelists within each panel. So I know it can be biased if we are clapping for our own panel, but we are gonna try to be fair and to be, do our best to represent with our claps each what we believe is the best was the best panel to present the ideas and arguments forward. So let's start with from left to right. We will clap for the federal government clarity, position, and sustaining their arguments. We will clap for the, what about the everyday people? And now we clap for the environmental scientists. And finally, for the mining companies. So it seems we have a clear winner, which are the everyday people. Maybe because we are everyday people. Claps again for everybody. Thank you, everybody, for your participation in this debate.